Okay, so today I want to switch things up a little bit. I spend a great deal of time, especially in the recent past, highlighting problematic areas within the industry, railing on games for launching half-baked, broken, and overrun with overzealous monetization, but the flip side to that is the alternate reality of gaming that exists in the shadow of the AAA giants. A while ago, I started a series called the Indie Game Spotlights, with the first entry being a game called Spellbreak, developed by a studio called Proletariat. The game has very interesting mechanics and makes its initial play at the Battle Royale genre by spinning a new gameplay loop that revolves around spell weaving and elemental combos with an emphasis on RPG mechanics. In my opinion, the game has tremendous potential and was well deserving of a spotlight since it ran counter to a lot of the practices which I find to be unsavory in the greater industry at large. Well, today I want to do the second installment in the Indie Game Spotlight series because I've been told about another game worth covering that deserves to be highlighted and praised. The name is Deep Rock Galactic, developed by Ghost Ship Games. The game is currently on PC and Xbox One, so if you are primarily a PS4 player, it's unfortunately unavailable. But despite its slightly limited accessibility, it's still worth covering in a video. The fundamental gameplay loop is mining minerals and FPS combat with alien monsters. Players can descend to various planets with different mineral compositions and enemies in order to mine lucrative deposits of ore. They can venture off alone or work within a cooperative team of 4, but I found the best experience to be playing in a group of 4 players to the maximum, regardless of whether or not that group has voice communication or not. Once the mission starts, the players are placed into a procedurally generated mine, where they must explore, dig, and excavate until they have either met certain benchmarks and extracted enough materials, or they get bored and wish to stop. During the expedition, various enemies may show up, making for hectic encounters and standoffs, which can often end up being quite cinematic. One moment that stuck out the most to me, and I really regret not gathering footage at the time, was when all the enemies were coming through this really long tunnel from one direction, and my entire team had this sort of Alamo-like standoff as we tried to hold the line. The thing to note about procedural generation, though, since it is such a fundamental piece of Deep Rock Galactic, is that companies often get it wrong, or use it as a gimmick. I can't help but think of games like Destiny 2 and its Curse of Osiris DLC where there were procedurally generated levels that were an absolute joke. Well, Deep Rock Galactic and its subterranean chambers seem to hit the procedural generation nail right on the head. Chambers vary in size, sometimes cramped and winding, other times vast and sprawling, but I've yet to encounter a level that felt uncomfortable, really. Sometimes one must dig out a new entrance to a room or something like that, or destroy crystals to advance, but it never felt like the system was badly constructing the layout, which is rather impressive. Players dump resources into a mule robot or a central pod as they advance, and upon reaching the end of their desired adventure, they call in the dropship to pick them up. Now, at first, I did not realize how hectic this last part can really be. In early levels, it was easy to make it to the ship, even though it can drop quite far away from where you are currently exploring when you call it in. But later on different planets with more rich resources, but also stronger enemies, the creatures come in force, and running through the tunnels, surrounded by a horde of alien monsters, becomes a pretty frantic race to the finish, which has a different pace than the rest of the level. The atmosphere, sound design, and cohesive environment make for a really well-rounded experience. When listening to some of the tracks, I actually got a very strong Stranger Things vibe. Now listen to this part as we hold down the fort and wait for the dropship to arrive.
Back to hell!
Now, some people will certainly be wondering what else comes with the game because we need a reason to go down and dig for these minerals. There has to be progression. Well, there is. There is a fairly well-developed perk system, though I will say a lot of the perks are kind of lame. I'm not going to lie about that. They do very minimal things, but some are interesting, so as you progress, it definitely makes up for it. And there is also a class system. There are a few different character types you can select, like Engineer, Heavy Gunner, Scout, etc., each with their own sort of playstyle. The Engineer can drop turrets, and the Heavy Gunner has like a shield mechanism, that kind of stuff, for example. I started off with the Gunner, and I enjoyed it, but really got attached when I started using the Scout specifically, which has high mobility and a grapple gun. Each class also has equipment upgrades to choose from and purchase as you complete expeditions and mine different materials, and all of the different progression mechanisms combined start to pile up and create a system where you feel a sense of evolution. My number one fear as I played a few missions was that it would get stale. I had encountered great procedural generation, but a lot of similarity in level design. But then it became clear that there is a very diverse spread of biome types on the planet's surface, as well as a good selection of different material types to gather, which don't just differ in color and name, but also gathering style. There are larger relics that require someone to carry them outright, as well as a bunch of different types of stones, as well as vegetation that you can start to have as objectives, and these different materials are present in, for instance, an ice biome or a jungle biome, where weather affects your character's mobility, and chasms in the ice biome can open up underneath you as the glacier splits apart. After numerous hours, I am constantly encountering new things, or having moments that do keep me interested. The game comes in with a $25 price tag, which is less than half of what a typical AAA game nowadays would cost you, and it offers what I consider to be a well-rounded and complete package for that tag as well. If you are considering it though, be well aware that the standard loop is drop down to a cave, mine things, kill bugs, repeat, all the while leveling up your preferred class and unlocking new upgrades and perks. Another factor that I take heavily into consideration when evaluating games for the indie spotlight is longevity. Is the game active? Does it have a good track record of updates? And most importantly, how likely is it to provide ongoing support? Well, Deep Rock Galactic has some very solid population numbers on Steam, which is the most accessible analytics that I have at the moment, with a proven track record of updates and an exceptionally active and transparent development team who openly and routinely communicate with the player base. Deep Rock Galactic also shows all the signs of being a game that has a future and becomes a safer purchase with the knowledge that it won't just evaporate or be left stagnant for long periods of time. In that sense, I get a very strong Frostpunk vibe as well. Frostpunk is an example of a game that launched as a polished and well-rounded product and then added on additional content like Clockwork to further emphasize their commitment to the player base. And just like 11-bit studios, Ghost Ship Games has projected that sort of atmosphere and helps build confidence that the game will persist and be worth playing long into the future, and also well worth checking back on. I'm not usually a fan of cartoon art styles. Having a game take on a deliberately stylized form is fine, that's one thing, but when it's really cartoony, I tend to be not very interested. But that wasn't really the case here. Though the game is clearly cartoon space dwarves mining for riches, it still had a sense of identity that I could get behind, rather than seeming like a play at the child audience that, as we all know, is extensive, easy to cater to, and a veritable cash cow of potential without the stone-cold necessity for any real innovation. Deep Rock Galactic played on the sort of childlike enjoyment I used to have when like Flash games first came to the web, but also took it up a notch with the ability to make plays, carry a team, and with the enemy density and the various difficulty settings, which seem to drastically up the difficulty the higher you climb, as well as the amount of enemies present, it had the added element of strategy that a simple mining game would never really have, since it relied on luck and just delving deeper, if you will. I said before that the best way to play is in a team, and normally I would never even take that position because often playing cooperatively with other players can be a real hassle. But for some reason, nearly every single team in Deep Rock Galactic that I was matched with, minus a couple players who bailed out when they died, but that's understandable, but most every team was helpful, fun, vocal, quick on revives, and even offering up advice in the pre- and post-game launch bay, since at least for the very first few hours that I played, they could tell how new I was, and they were extremely helpful. The game is PvE only and has a mostly relaxed atmosphere with satisfying sound effects and really cool layouts, while also ramping up the tension with rhythmic swarms and the final extraction portion. For $25, I am happy to have purchased it, but, and here is where I need to be 100% clear, it is a game with a very specific identity, and if you are on the fence about it, hold off, at least for a short time, to make sure. I would never want to cause players to buy something that they regret buying, but if you are very enthusiastic, just know that the game clearly originates from a passionate team with enough polish to feel relatively smooth, and a strong core gameplay loop with a very promising future. Very quickly on the topic of bugs, LOL, bugs. I mean glitches and exploits, that kind of thing. I am delighted to say that I experienced literally 0 game-breaking bugs in my entire time playing. No crashes whatsoever, not a single crash. No large issues of any kind. The worst thing that happened was some enemies would crawl across objects in a strange way, and sometimes they would like phase through things. And that didn't even happen very often. So in the current landscape where technical state is a topic of great controversy, Deep Rock Galactic is not in a state where it will wear on your nerves. But yeah, that's it. Not much more to say. Good game, certainly containing many hours of enjoyment if you like the subject matter, the art style, and the gameplay loop, and one that was well deserving of the second Indie Game Spotlight video. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. There are various ways to get integrated with Upper Echelon, ranging from merchandise, if you want to buy that and support us, to various different gaming communities. We have a Facebook group, a Discord server, our own gaming forums, etc. Some more stuff too, but I'll cut it there and I'll stop rambling. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.